well, you're not owning your outcome, right? Um, and like,
Mm.
you know, giving yourself your own empowerment to drive your outcome is really important.
Welcome to Uplift and Elevate. This is our Uplift Her podcast series that shares the courageous journeys of individuals getting an honest look into their life, their struggles, successes, and how they broke down barriers to get where they are today. We are Amy and Christina and believe honest conversations can help give you the elevation and empowerment to write your own success story. From Unilever, BT, Technicolor, Jamie Oliver's Restaurant and Ultima are just some of the big names our next guest has worked for. She's one of the 16% of women in chief financial officer positions and knows what it's like to fight for a seat at the table in a man's world. I've had the privilege of working with her and have always been amazed and inspired by her approach to managing her career. She's a mum, she's a CFO, and an inspiring leader. She's Tamsin Ashmore.
We've obviously known each other for a while, and we've had the pleasure of working with each other, which was, I think, certainly a brilliant experience of mine. But I'd kind of love to go back a bit further and kind of understand what some of the early contexts that you can share that has shaped you into who you are today.
Sure, it's a big question. So I'm South African,
Yes.
and I
Hmm.
think being South African is quite a core part of actually what shaped me, and my heritage and where I come from. So my grandmother, which in South African language is my Oma, um, she um, she was an Afrikaans South African. And she must have passed away about 25 years ago. So, and she died when she was 90. So, if you think she was born therefore in the early 1900s, um, and in the
Yeah.
1950s, she started up her own business, running a nursery home, a nursing home in my home city. And for an Afrikaans woman in the 50s to own your own business and have a family, um, it's pretty incredible. And
I'd say.
she did it with tenacity, determination. She's the most phenomenal, astute woman, and she was so driven, and it was really like for her family. And back in those days, she wasn't allowed to own bank account. She couldn't be a business owner. So my grandfather had to be the signatory, and so he had to sign up to all of
Wow.
that. And I actually think that's pretty amazing of my grandfather as well, because again, as an Afrikaans South African, being born in the early 1900s, to actually have that level of openness as well, I think is quite impressive
Mm.
from the era that they came in, and for him to have supported my Oma like that. And we all talk about how in my family how she's this incredible woman and that level of determination and not giving up and just driving that forward. I mean, she ended up by selling the business, but it was incredibly successful. And she ended up by selling it because she got too old and running it just, was too much. But to have done all of that, to have started it and to have run such a successful operation for me and in that time is just been always, if I could have a bit of her in me, I think it's pretty incredible. Yeah.
Well, I was actually going to ask you because, like, I've always, in our time that we've ever spent together, I've always kind of thought of you as being one of the most ambitious people that I know. But now, obviously, you sharing your your grandmother's like kind of background gives me like a little bit of glimpse into kind of your your background. Do you think that your ambition kind of comes from her?
I think it's quite weird when it comes to ambition because I wouldn't have ever said, oh, I'm the most ambitious person. I would just say I'm so passionate about learning and growing and doing
Mm.
stuff well. Um, and that's always really driven me. And I've always had this huge amount of impatience that I believe something can be done better. And it's really annoyed me in my career when I've worked for someone where I've gone, I really think if I did your job, I'd do it better, and everyone would be much better from it. And I think that's driven a lot of my of how I've gone through my career. It's been me going, oh, I think this can be done better, and you're a bit in the way. I think this could really work, and I've had that level of I guess it's ended up by reflecting on it, its ambition, but it's actually been driven by how I get satisfied by work. I really enjoy what I do. There are people that go, oh, I hate working. I love working. Like people talk about, oh, I've got one of my friends who I play tennis with. She's like, oh, my husband and I have a plan. We're going to retire at 50. And I'm like, oh God, like that. No, like I just want to work. I want to be a chair one day because I just want to keep working and doing stuff. Maybe I don't want to work 5 days a week, 40, 50 hours, 60 hours a
Mm.
week, but I always want to do stuff that's driving stuff forward. I found that so interesting. And I guess that's what's driven my career is I don't like sitting still. So I like being part of making something better. And and if I feel that the people more senior than me are not doing that how I think it could be done better, like then I find like, well, then I want to be where they are so I can at least do that and drive that forward. Um, so that's been quite a key part of like, I've always been working towards the fact that I like being the decision maker. And that doesn't mean like I like having like one of the most incredible things in senior leadership is that you get to sit around the table and listen to everyone else and you get to hear everyone else's perspectives, and from that you can build like what the best way forward is. And I love that. Like that's an incredible opportunity. It's something that like businesses give you. It's a real gift, right? To be able to sit around the table and hear and have all of that input. It's a privilege, and I love having that privilege, and I love being able to take all of that information and work through, okay, so therefore what's the best way forward. That's been kind of a key driver for me, is being able to learn in all of those situations.
Yeah, and it's interesting hearing you talk though, because I think there is you have a certain like kind of self-confidence. Like you said, you can identify where things potentially can be done better, but also like kind of the confidence. I've always admired the confidence of being able to say, actually, I'm going to go and actually try and do that and kind of to prove to people that it can be done better. Like, kind of, where does where does that come from then? Like, is that from seeing your role models or kind of, um,
Well, I'm a
like you said, maybe
qualified
not necessarily ambition, but
I think I'm a qualified speech and drama teacher, so something you may not know about me. So
yes. No, I did actually know that
did
about
you?
you. I
Okay.
remember you telling me that now. Yes.
So I used to like act like on stages in South Africa, and I think when you have to like when you're going out to perform, you've got to put on your big girl pants, right, and get out there. And no matter how much your
Yeah.
stomach's jittering and everything like that, so there's definitely been an element of teaching yourself the confidence of like
Mm.
fake it until you can make it, really. So let's get out there and act that way. And then I'm a really strong believer in being the being the greatest praise giver of yourself. Not waiting for
Mm.
everyone else to say what they think of you. Like really like believing in yourself. Because I think if you wait around and have everyone else give you that input, it becomes quite fragile. Um, Whereas working on yourself being that confidence giver and your praise giver, I think is really valuable. And it gets easier with age. But I think it's something that I've believed in quite a bit in that way. And I'd say there's that. But then I also think like another element is being surrounded by like my best friends are like amazing. They just think I'm awesome. And having those people around me as well who
Mm.
you've chosen to be in your
Right,
life,
your
and then
champions.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then and you trust them, and for them to think you're great and they to be your greatest advocates, and on top of them, that helps you believe in yourself as well, doesn't it? So I think there's a huge like mix of all of that. And um, I've always felt like if I, I've just felt like, "Well, I can do it. Like I know I can, and I'm not going to listen to all of this, and I'm just going to keep going and learn from it. And I think if you trust the people around you, you've got the right people around you. I think that's a huge part of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Kind of comes down quite a lot, doesn't it, to the environment that you put yourself in as well? Because I think what you're saying is those. people that you surround yourself with, okay, from a family perspective, is not
Yeah.
necessarily going to change. You've picked those people, like kind of your
Mm.
friends and like kind of your kind of community. But from a workplace perspective, that can change quite quickly. So it's almost quite important that you pick wisely
Hugely.
as
But
well
it's your
the
sponsors,
environment.
right? It's
Yeah.
absolutely your sponsors in the workplace. I mean, I've been, um, I think, one of the things that I think have been really valuable to me in being able to, I suppose, go forward with my decisions and so forth has been having great sponsors. Like years ago, way
Mm.
back earlier in my career, like I was doing a role and another one came available and it was way more senior than where I was. And I went to really my mentor in the business and I said, I want to do that job. Um, like, will you support me? Will you sponsor me in doing that?
Mm.
And this is why, and this is what I think I can do. And he was like, okay, well, get through the interview process. I'll put in a word saying I'll support you on the way. And I went through the interview process and I ended up by being the one that was chosen for it. And he was my greatest advocate. One of the things he did when I got the role was he'd said, like, look, I know this is a big jump for Tamsin. So I'm going to have weekly sessions with her and support her on anything that she's struggling with because I know she'll learn and be able to do this. I mean, couldn't ask for more from someone. Like how he helped
No, definitely.
accelerate my career, support me in that. And so I think, huge value in having a really good sponsors. And, he still checks in on me today, right? He's retired and so forth, still checks
Very
in on
good.
how my career is going. But having great sponsors, so important. Great people around you that really believe in you and can be your advocates are like, and for me, those have been my female friends. And I think I wish, like what you've got here with Uplift Her, like I wish I'd had that because I didn't have a female network, like a female career network. And I think
Mm.
that is so valuable because the more you can talk to other women, you can hear your story and go, oh, bloody brilliant, keep going, go do it. That's
Mm.
what you need, right? And when you have all of those things surrounding you and building you up, you can't but just go, actually, I can do it, believe in myself, brilliant.
Yeah.
um,
I mean, I think that's kind of why we've all like created Uplift Her, because it just feels like that certainly throughout my career wasn't accessible, like wasn't
no,
available, and wasn't really kind of something that is kind of pushed. Interestingly, sponsorship, which you're right, is such a big thing in terms of like progression and even having a sounding board to kind of figure out actually is this the right route and get like feedback and all of those things. How do you think people, or how did you go about getting sponsors, like kind of and finding them in?
I thought about who I wanted and who I respected.
Okay.
It's all about the right fit.
Mm.
um, And then I asked. And if I didn't have the guts to ask, I asked somebody else that I really
Yep.
trusted and felt that could do it for me. One of my first line manager, I'd said to her that I wanted a mentor and I wanted somebody, and I got her to get me somebody in the organization that I'd sort of pinpointed that I wanted
That's
because I was
interesting.
too
Yeah.
junior at that time, and I needed her to help me with that conversation and navigate that conversation because I was still junior in my career, and sometimes those kind of things are quite big, to do.
Mm.
Um, and so she was awesome in that. And I guess she took that first step for me with that relationship. Um, and then since then, I've from having had the wealth of that relationship, I've almost had the courage then to go and ask for others, and go from there.
Mm.
I mean, I'm and I always think that, I mean, I have sponsors nowadays, like outside of our business, and I've just gone out there and asked for them. I've gone and asked other contacts, going, I'm looking for a new mentor. I'm looking for somebody. I'm now at this stage of my career. This is what I want. And I've had to sort of really like brainstorm who I kind of, what would work for me, what kind of
Yeah.
person, and then who do I respect enough to ask to go help me find this mentor. But life isn't given to you on a platter. You got to figure out what works for you, what's the right fit for what you're wanting in your career, what suits your personality, who you will listen to as well. Because there's no point in having a mentor if that kind of it's all about that right fit, isn't it? And that's a mentor, sponsor, they're both the same
Mm.
things really. They advocates for your career.
It's kind of
Mm.
almost like it's sort of like having to move. out of the way of yourself as well. Do you know what I mean? I think there's so much that we feel intimidated potentially by, like you said, like you have to go and ask, and you have to like kind of put yourself out there, and all of those kind of things that is quite uncomfortable a lot of the time. But you're right, it's just it isn't going to land like on your lap. And you kind of have to go and do something, like kind of, otherwise we is more likely that you're not going to get where you want to go.
Well, you're not owning
Um,
your outcome, right? Um, and like,
mm.
you know, giving yourself your own empowerment to drive your outcome is really important, right? So, if you just sit and wait, like, then you're just expecting things to land at the right time in the right moment, and that's
Mm.
lovely. Sometimes that has works brilliantly for some people. I would rather be far more empowered in my life and like work through actually what I'm really wanting. Um,
It's kind of so easy though, I think, to get kind of carried away in the day to day of the world of work, and kind of come in, head down, do the stuff that do you know what I mean? The millions of things that come through our inboxes, the like kind of the thousands of meetings that we have to sit through, and thinking that actually that is contributing or adding to your kind of, it is, we're not saying like kind of that look, we've all got a day job and we all have to kind of get stuff done, but I think there is a real difference. And I suppose what I have learned, certainly like kind of in my journey over the last kind of few years, there is a different message almost that we kind of need to be telling ourselves, that it's task based and kind of coming in. Half of your career is about developing your skills and doing the stuff like kind of that's in front of you, but the other half of it is about kind of developing that network, and like you said, thinking about who you're engaging with, thinking about kind of who can I get to kind of support me to get where I kind of want to go, and really thinking about where do you even want to go. I don't even think half of the people that like kind of I engage with or talk with, we even have a moment to think, because life kind of gets in the way. I think it's a real, I've always admired you in that, which I think is something that is quite unique compared to other people that I've met in my kind of career, that you've kind of always had that 50%. Like, do you know what I mean? You've always been quite clear that like kind of, um what can a company do for me? What can like kind of my manager offer me? How can I be active in this part? And I think for most of us, the balance isn't 50-50. It's 90-10, like, which is not always, which
well,
ends up not being in the great like kind of place.
I guess it's like it's a bit of give and take, isn't it? I work my
Mm.
butt off for an organization, and I
Oh
have the
yeah.
most incredible amount of passion and love for it, um, and I really always want it to exceed and excel. But with that, there's I'm not just there just to do that, because I give so much. I also
Mm.
expect stuff back. And there's certain things that I guess, yeah, I've always been quite clear on on my journey. I mean, even when it came to the fact that when I knew that I wanted to have a family, I planned that into my career. Timing didn't quite work, but never really does when you're planning that kind of stuff. But I knew I was quite clear on what level I wanted to be, before I
Mm.
had my daughter. Um, and I mean, okay, it's a while ago, and I really do hope some of these things change. But I also was very aware, having spoken to a lot of my friends, about how your priorities change and they shift, and your amount of time that you have shift. And so
Yeah.
I was very clear, like I wanted to be a director, but before I had my daughter. I wanted to have had that promotion, and that because I felt that it would have been a harder journey to have got there post that. Um, Given the number of non-diverse people maybe making decisions in the world. So it was
Well,
something
it's
that I
that piece about kind of sadly holding some like space and value before that dynamic changes, isn't it? I think that's the key thing.
absolutely,
And that
absolutely.
becomes really difficult if you're the one that hasn't got to that place. and then is trying to change those dynamics because of, like you said, your priorities and stuff need. If you can get, almost sadly, navigate yourself to a place
Yeah,
where you have the bargaining power to demand, like, kind of,
absolutely.
and the recognition to kind of be able to do that.
Yeah, and that was really important to me as part of my career planning, and when I made that decision of okay, now I'm ready, to start a family. Um, but besides that, I have been quite planned because not necessarily in the industry that I've been in or anything like that, but in actually what I do. Um, and one of the weird things I do, and I've always done it, is I update my CV regularly, really regularly, not just when I'm ready to look for a job, but I just
Yeah.
always refresh it because I find that it also always helps me go, oh, wow, this is what I've done that's different. Oh, I'm doing a bit of the same of what I've done before. Um, and it helps you sort of reposition it. And often, you write about like your key achievements and stuff, and you take a bit of, reflection on, oh, that's actually some great stuff that I've done, but what am I missing? So I found that really valuable as far as my career planning. But then what it's also always done is it's helped me know, and obviously, like, I'd always wanted to be on the C-suite. So initially, I'd always wanted to be CFO. So I knew what you needed to have. Um, so it helped me then
Mm,
make sure that I was filling in all the gaps, as well, because I
mm,
guess, one of the things, um, and I think, that all research says this, and it's been fed into me that way, is, as a woman, you're quite good at saying what you haven't done, in a job
yeah.
role. So for me, a big part was actually being able to go, I've done everything. And so being able to, like, point myself towards those gaps so that I could actually learn and grow from them, and so that I didn't have them, was quite important to me in my career planning as well. So it's definitely shaped, the fact that I knew that I wanted to be the CFO. And again, I why did I know that? Like, I guess, it's quite weird. I um as I said, like, I'm a qualified speech and drama teacher, and I performed on the stages. And actually, one of the things I wanted to be, um back in the day, was I wanted to be in films. I wanted to be in movies. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to act. Um, and then I had that incredibly
So
enlightening and
film and
quite
finance.
exactly disenchanting moment where I realized I really wasn't good enough. I wasn't going to make it to Hollywood. Best I found something else. um,
Shucks.
but I'd done this thing as a kid where we'd, like, set up our own businesses and done this kind of stuff, as an extramural, and I loved it. I'd loved being part of that decision making. I'd loved doing it, and I'd ended up, like, doing
Mm,
we'd, like, created some stuff that we sold and all of that. And I wasn't the person that had the great idea. I wasn't the person that did the design. I wasn't the person that was great at the selling, but I loved organizing it all. I loved making sure that we were all, like, part of the whole table together, and we were making the decisions on what we needed to do. Um, and I guess knowing that I loved that really helped me as far as the decisions I made of going into business and going into finance. Um, Really ended up on me going, okay, that's the route I want to end up in, because of it.
mm. No, amazing. I think that your point about doing your CV last month, we were kind of, one of our topics was marketing yourself and your career, and that was one of the things that we kind of pulled out of that, was
Oh,
actually,
really?
like, even if you're not looking for a job, like, just simply the act of doing your CV, being able to articulate kind of what you've achieved and all of those kind of things, but also, like, not even doing something about the gaps, but even just identifying the gaps, like,
Yeah.
kind of beforehand, is also incredibly kind of important, because sometimes we just also don't know. And again, we're kind of expecting people to tell us, or, like, kind of for us to try and reframe it. But that's also, I think, kind of incredibly key.
It's useful. And
So
I think
yeah,
what
so
I've
good advice
always
on
done,
that.
I've always spoken to, like, recruiters all the time, not looking, doesn't matter, still talk to
Mm,
you, because I find out then what I'm also missing and what I need to be thinking of as well.
yeah,
So just being able to have those conversations, it's like a different type of network. But it's a really useful network because
mm,
it helps build on what you should be shaping. And I've always done that. And that's helped me again go, oh, need to be working on this. And it's actually what's
yeah,
propelled each of my role moves, because I've never moved jobs for more money, actually. That's never been the reason. I've always moved to learn more and to grow more, and to fill in my gaps, basically going, oh, this job's not going to give me this anymore. This has given me everything it can do. I need to then find something else that can actually fill in all of these spaces. Um,
Mm,
and so, I mean, I recognize that's quite unique because, most people that leave because they want more money or something like that, or they've got this, and they haven't gone through that kind of gap analysis. But I've always found that quite rewarding to go that route instead, because actually that keeps building you for the future as well, um, depending on what you're
mm,
wanting to do, right?
definitely. We talked a bit about your career, but if you were to kind of summarize it, with two highs and one low, what would that be?
Two highs. Um, the first high really is the first job I
Mm,
got. um, it's it was such an awesome role working at Unilever, and I think being a grad at Unilever and having had the opportunity that I got with that was just incredible. That role has given my career path so much. I was so fortunate to have got myself into that position, and for how it has therefore really enabled me through the rest of my career. I mean, that time in Unilever was awesome. I've had a lot of highs. Um, I feel bad. Like I feel like I need to choose each company, because there've been so many. Like really, there've been so, except for one, but there've been so many amazing wins in them. Um, Actually, no, I'm going to choose the one I'm in now. So the one I'm in now, um, I'd say the biggest high for me is in the role I'm in now. So I'm the CFO CEO of a basically a managed services business, and we support companies and all of their all round like cloud security and workspace support. Um, and being able to have been really key and really really fundamental in driving our transformation. Um, like when you see like your ideas like coming to fruition, and having been able to be part of that strategic growth and really, see it coming out in the numbers. Um,
mm,
that's massively rewarding. Huge highs there. And the lows, I think my low is very clear. I left. I left Technicolor, so I left the film industry, which I loved so much. But I left it because I really wanted to be the CFO. And it was really hard to become a CFO if you're not a CFO. It's like one of those real chicken and egg issues. Um, and so you all end up by
mm,
needing to just take where the opportunity is. And I was really, really clear that as much as I loved being in VFX, and it thrilled me. I loved it so much. I had such passion for it. Um, that in order to grow my career more, the only way would be to take an opportunity as the CFO. So I took the opportunity to be the CFO of the Jamie Oliver Restaurant Group. And I knew going in that it was a massive risk. Enough people had told me it was a massive risk as well. But I also knew if I didn't take it, like the opportunity of becoming a CFO was, they were
mm,
few and far between, really. So this was my way in. And it was really about a turnaround plan. And I went in, and within 6 weeks, I knew it wasn't a turnaround. Um, and I knew that it was instead just an incredibly tough, challenging situation with not enough cash, not enough revenue. And I was suddenly in a situation of 1,500 people's livelihood on my shoulders, which is not something you ever take lightly.
gosh, that's,
Um,
yeah, I was going to say that's a huge pressure.
and it was awful. It was awful. We ended up by
Mm,
trying to work through a distressed debt sale, and we ended up by putting the business into administration. And I ended up by having to be in the situation where I had to tell um, everyone in the office that they'd lost their jobs, that the business was winding up. Um, and you've been sitting with all of these people, and you hear them talking about, oh, we can't go out tonight, I've run out of money, it's going to be 2 weeks till the end of the month, all of that kind of stuff. And then you're
mm,
telling people that this is it, this is the company's done, and it
Yeah.
was awful. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. But it I then worked for the administrator and did the wind up, but it completely shaped me. And I think your lows, and they always say, your failures, your lows, they're what shape you in your career.
Mm.
And it was the hardest 7 months I've ever had in my life. And my husband, literally, I couldn't have done it without him. I couldn't have actually kept going, because he was just amazing, making sure that like life continued. But it was like it was a 90-hour week. It was not sleeping because I was so worried
Right.
about that business.
Yeah.
Um, and just all the emotions, all the people that work for you, knowing what you're
I was
fighting
gonna
for,
say,
is
yeah, it
just
sounded like
really,
the
really
emotional
hard.
kind of part of it, not just.
Yeah, no, it was awful. But
Mm.
it taught me so much. And in fact, then becoming the CFO of Ultima, everything I learned when COVID happened and how I'd already prepared our business, um, for that, and how I was able to navigate us through that storm, on a cash basis, um, and on an employee protection of role basis, and all of those things I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have known, like, if I hadn't had that experience. So I felt
Mm.
like I learned so much, and I learned so much about how to choose a role as well, um, and what was really important to me. And I think until you've been really challenged by being in a space that doesn't quite fit with you, um, and where you can see the decisions that have been made just don't aren't what you would have done, um,
Mm.
to then it really helps you shape what good looks like as far as making the next decision for what kind of company you'd work for. And that was, yeah, that was definitely huge learning, and I still carry that today as far as in the decisions I make, because there was a lot there that you can learn from, as far as like business playbooks.
Well, you don't want it to like that massive challenge to kind of go to waste without like learning from it.
Yeah, and that's how you learn,
Like
right?
that's the
It's absolutely how you
yeah.
learn. You end up with the battle scars from it. And I took time off to recover. Um, but it was,
Did you?
yeah, I did. I took 3 months off of just breathing, and time with the family and filling my cup again, and re-energizing myself. A lot of meditation. But actually, came out there like guns firing, and then 6 months later COVID happened. I was like, oh geez, like, really? um but I'd chosen, and I was quite clear on how to support Ultima in those next steps, so that, yeah, it was
Mm.
worth it in the end. Yeah, career lows normally are as awful as they are.
Yes. Yeah. As long as you can look and, like you said, look the other side and actually take the, I think the emotional part that you're kind of referring to, I think is as long as it's not too deep. Do you know what I mean? You've kind of done the work. Like you said, you took time out, you got to kind of recover. It has to also be balanced enough so that actually those battle scars aren't like
Absolutely,
you can kind of recover from them like kind of
you have to.
afterwards and have the time to kind of do that, because otherwise then you don't learn like kind of, and then it actually becomes kind of damaging as well to kind of be in that
You're
environment.
absolutely right there.
Um, you, you're quite planned though, aren't you? Like kind of like you said, you've got an intent. You kind of know what direction you're going in. Um, what happens when it doesn't go to plan?
Things don't go to plan. I mean, that's like being flexible and being able to, you can have
Mm,
um a huge part of my job is about, like, I'll go, oh, we're going to, I'm planning that we're going to land on this number. Oh my goodness, do we land on that number? No. But like, things always take a bit of a different route, right? But what you've got to be able to do is not be attached to the plan, right? It's about
mm,
the journey there. Um, and there will always be sort of side steps along the way. There will be, I'm quite relaxed about that in a way. Like, I think it's a bit like how you make a decision. I'm quite comfortable in going, oh, new information, different decision. Um, it's like I love being able to have a plan, but it's the same thing. Like you go on holiday, you're like, oh, we're going to do this today. No one really wants to wake
Mm,
up and then go, okay, we're still doing this when we all sort of feel a bit different. It's the same thing, isn't it? Like in order to get the most out of it, you've got to be quite flexible about it. Um,
mm,
when I think it's hard sometimes. Like it's sometimes you go, okay, like we'd planned to do this. I'd planned this in my career and I'd planned that I'd be in the business for this amount of time and then I'd be doing this. Um, and it doesn't necessarily always land that way. And that part's really hard. Um, but I think a huge part for me is always about reframing stuff. Um, and I've got a very positive, I've got a naturally positive outlook. So I'm it's how I'm made. It's how I've grown up, and I like to look at things on the up versus the down. So generally, if something's changed, okay, what's the win? Um, and I think it works for me far better to reshape it that way and go, okay, this hasn't been quite what I said, but actually, what can I gain from it? What else can I learn from it? How else can we get there? I took years ago when I left Unilever. I thought, oh, I'll go into banking. That sounds awesome. Um, and
good to
I'd
see
studied
you in
corporate
banking.
finance. I know exactly. I'd studied corporate finance. I thought, oh, this would be really cool, like work. And I got there and I was like, oh, this is putrid. This is absolutely awful. This is so not what I thought. I've just left this amazing company to be here. So that didn't go according to plan. But I think being able to like reflect on that, um, and not like in that situation, I was like, well, this really doesn't work. And then you're all scared, oh, how's it going to look on my CV and so forth. And so then I just went traveling. So
mm,
get out of here,
Brilliant.
go traveling, figure it out, take yourself away from this because this isn't good and this is sucking the life out of you. So I think it is about going. Not every decision I've made is the right one at all. They're always going to be, but I think being able to stop, reflect. Often, I think, I often find taking yourself out of something is hugely valuable. You don't always get that privilege. So,
mm,
being able to create a different way in a different space in doing that. Um, so, you are giving yourself an opportunity to reflect on when something hasn't gone according to plan. You know, that gives you a huge amount of energy, I find, if you can just take yourself away and then have that reset. I think I've sometimes, and I'm sure everyone has this, you sometimes you get to the time where you're about to go on holiday and you're so burnt out and you like everything's just so hectic, um and you get on holiday and the huge value for me, and I'm really clear on it, is I completely disconnect from work. I trust my people.
mm,
I'm going to leave them to it. And I'm going to disconnect so I can reset and I can figure everything out myself. Um, and actually, generally, by the time you've got to a holiday, quite a few things haven't gone according to plan, which is why you've been going like
Yep.
10 to, it doesn't. So actually being able to reset and get back into a place of how you wanting to be, and I often take that time of a holiday of really going, okay, what's working, what's not working, what do I need to change? um, but it's all about being able to create those spaces, be it the fact that actually I'm really clear, like an hour out of my day walking the dogs is a really good way to become to detach myself from everything
mm.
else and to just reset. All of those things are just about helping you reset when the plan isn't going where you want it to.
I was going to ask you, like, kind of, what do you do to kind of like manage those difficult kind of moments? Or like, it sounds like whilst you're very planned and you've kind of the key thing is that you kind of almost do it regularly and often, and you're kind of surrounding yourself like with people with different people and the right people at the right moment in time with intents, but also making sure that you've got like a mechanism or a way of knowing what you need, like kind of personally, to be able to kind of keep going and sustaining and being able to kind of adapt to those changes that are in front of you.
Yeah, I've worked hard on that. I think learning to listen
Mm,
to yourself and understand yourself and understand what you need and how you can be able to give the best, is really important. And I think sort of when you're young in your career and still developing as a person as well. I mean, we're always still developing, but still figuring out stuff. It sometimes it it's about being able to really learn what you need. And I take time out to listen to myself. I take time out. I live in the countryside. I walk the dogs. It's massively important to me. It's actually one of the great things of having dogs is that no matter what, you've got to walk them. So, but it's
rain, sunshine, everything.
wind. Um,
Snow. Yeah.
but it's really good because actually you have an hour. I can be absolutely like so frustrated with something that's happened in the day. And then you walk out and you walk with the dogs. And my dogs know the moment I'm not present with them. They
Mm.
begin acting like morons. And so actually I've got to be present with my dogs. Same like a kid, right? Same
Yeah, I
thing.
was
And
gonna say not on the
yeah.
phone and all of that kind of stuff.
But you're there, and that for me is a massive breather. Um, so walking the dogs, like the things that I've learned, like, from like actually looking after your health, looking after your sleep, um, managing all of those things, actually manage your stress and manage how you handle everything else, um, surrounding yourself with a tribe, like all of those things are hugely valuable to then how
Mm,
you approach everything. And those have been, I guess, how I've learned to listen. I need a lot of time on my own. That's how I am. But I also need good quality time with great people as well.
mm,
Yeah.
100%. So think about you now. How have you navigated having a seat at the table and a voice at the table? So,
How have I navigated it? Um, well, there've been a variety of different ways. Sometimes I've pushed my way in. Um,
mhm, good for you.
sometimes, um, sometimes I've earned my way in through having great sponsors. Um, but I also think there's a there's there's a real strength in the fact that when you are accountable, when you do deliver, and you've got strong people around you, they recognize that and they want you there.
Mm,
Um, so there's a large amount about also people bearing witness to that, and making sure that those people are your support. I try to do that to my people
mm,
now as well, raise them up.
mm,
And I think being able to have people that recognize that, um, I think I've been very clear, I'm very comfortable to question and challenge and ask. And when you're around the table and you're doing that with the best interests of the business, you earn your seat by doing that. Yeah. But I've definitely had instances in my career where I've not been invited to the table and I've had to um, do a lot of pushing and driving and difficult conversations to get myself invited there. Um, but and that's been hard. Not things I want to do again. Um, but
yeah.
and weirdly enough, generally once you've got there, people suddenly go, "Oh, we should be in there all along." Added some real value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose it comes like full circle, comes back to that thing that you were saying right at the beginning of you can't just wait for it to land on your lap. It's not going to. So
No.
if it's not happening, you kind of have to put yourself um, out there, however difficult that is. Um,
It's not
so
comfortable, and
what
often
do
by
you
the time
think?
I've got there, I've been frustrated to push myself there, but I've also had quite a lot of determination going, but I know I should be there. I know I
Hmm,
can add value, and I know that like this would be better for everyone if I could be supporting there. So I think it's come often with my impatience and my frustration on that. Yeah.
Also then understanding your value and kind of being able to articulate your value, which again, if you don't do the practices around like kind of writing your CV and like kind of doing the thing, like it's then becomes very difficult for you to position that. So that sounds like that's been a key thing as well.
And another thing that I found, and nowadays I find it really rewarding actually, is getting the feedback from people around you. Because people see you in a different way and they can recognize some qualities that you may not be recognizing as well.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, getting feedback from people you respect, I think, is quite key in that. Otherwise, it's meaningless feedback. But I think hearing from people the value that they've found by you being in the room, I think, is really useful as well. And people, it's sometimes hard to ask, but people don't mind giving it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I found that really, really helpful as far as being able to add even like my wins and my competencies on my CV, or even when I'm articulating my story to people, to have their reflections from what they've felt has worked. And sometimes you're going, oh, but I thought that was obvious. You're like, no, that's not obvious to me. Like what you're doing is great. So I think getting
Mm.
feedback from people is really helpful as well.
So if you don't get, ask,
Yeah.
however uncomfortable it is.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next for Tamsin, the woman
Um,
with a plan?
there's a plan. There's a plan. So I'm CFO COO at the moment. Um, and I'd absolutely love to be like an MD of a division. I'd really, really love that. I think some stage maybe I'd love to be CEO. At the moment, I think MD of a division feels far more like
You'd
reachable,
be amazing at both.
Thank you. But I would love that. I currently do trustee roles for some charities and so forth, and I really enjoy that. And I'd like to do more in like that kind of
Mm.
non-exec way. It's something again, there's a huge richness in looking at things differently. Like I was on the audit committee for the London Film School, and I loved that. It's just like a different perspective, it's all pro bono work, and I love being able to get the different sites to different ways that people work. You're learning from that. So I think for me, um, growing as far as that sort of cross-functional space, which is why I love the element of the COO role, growing into being able to be an MD and a CEO, and then also being able to have that opportunity of being able to sort of impart that to others, right? Through NED roles is something I'm still quite focused on. Yeah. And then more
Brilliant.
holidays.
More holidays. More walking the dog. More holidays. Got to have that balance in life of time. Well, I have immensely enjoyed our conversation. I think it's really powerful to kind of hear from you. I loved working with you, and I loved even like kind of looking at kind of where you are today. And I'm incredibly appreciative of you sharing your story with us.
Oh, thank you. It's been a privilege sharing it. I've loved sharing it. I've loved the questions. They're so interesting, thought-provoking. It always makes you think about stuff, which I love.
Thank you for listening to Uplift and Elevate. This was an episode with Tamsin Ashmore. Our goal at Uplift Her is to develop effective and lasting change by focusing on building a strong community, providing essential career development resources and effective mentoring programs. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, follow us on Instagram, and reach out if you're interested in getting involved and learning more about our work.